So the seat for now is gonna sit like this for a couple of days, but I have a huge shipment coming in an hour or two from Summit Racing, so I'll be able to finish the exhaust. I'll be able to do the steering shaft. I'll be able to finish all of the fuel system, which I have a couple of -6AN to barb fitting adapters coming, so I can rebuild this out of some stainless steel hardline. I have 2 glass fuel bowls coming, a fuel log that has 1 inlet and 2 outlets for both carbs, and then I already have a fuel pressure regulator and a whole bunch of fittings and stuff like that. So I can start looking at doing all of the fuel system. I also have the throttle cable. Since I have the throttle pedal in, I can get the throttle cable to work with the throttle linkage here and get all of that figured out. I'll have to make a little bracket there, otherwise that'll be pretty simple. The hard part is these carbs are a manual choke, and what most people do is they just choke one of them, usually the one closest to the firewall because it's the simplest. And so that's something I may consider, but living in Minnesota, there's going to be that beginning and end of the year when having a functional choke will be really nice. I'm going to look into doing that too, because that's going to kind of occupy the same space as the fuel system and everything like that. So getting further and further along on this thing. I also have a clutch pedal coming today, so I can make a mount for the clutch pedal. And then I have all the fittings so that I can modify the lines coming out of the bell housing, and I'll be able to shorten the bleeder one and route it to where I want. And then I have a bulkhead union coming, so I'll be able to plumb the soft line up to that and then do the hard line up to the master cylinder. So I think the next step for me right now is to get this thing back up off the ground on jack stands. The first thing I'm gonna do today when the parts show up is finish the exhaust, which will probably take me the rest of the day. I want to get that out of the way because the exhaust is about 3/4 of the way done, and the back half will be pretty complicated to get those rolled tips that I have for it right here. These nice rolled tips. To get those things perfectly even and parallel and square is going to take some fidgeting for sure. And so since that is kind of looming over me as the hardest part of the upcoming projects on the horizon, I'm going to get that done first. I never leave the hardest stuff for last, because sometimes by then you're just worn down mentally, physically, and that causes you to kind of start wanting to cut some corners. So I always deal with the hardest parts head on, get that done, because once you get that done, you'll be rolling with the momentum and stuff. So I'll check back in with you when I get working on the exhaust. All right, I got the exhaust done now, lowercase d. Still have to do a little bit of finish welding on a couple of exhaust hangers, but I'll do that when I take them out. So here you can see the tips are in place. I have them covered in blue tape because there's some nice chrome rolled tips, and I didn't want them to get all scratched up. And you can kind of see there's this nice rolled edge on it, and real happy with how it turned out. It was a bit of a struggle. The first one is always pretty easy to do, but then matching the second one up is the hard part. And so I'll show you what we have going on underneath here real quick. So this is where I had previously left off right there. So I put a V-band on, and the exhaust is going under the axle, but it clears the whole range of motion for the airbags and everything and clears the ground. There's just no room to go up and over the axle So if anything needs to be serviced, it's just pop one bolt off here, pop another bolt off there where the hanger is, and it can come out. And so I ended up just doing a whole bunch of pie cuts to get the exhaust to where it needed to go. So it goes up and over this cross member here, and then comes and pokes out the bumper. It's nice and snug to the bumper right now. I did that just so I know that the height of both of the tips is equal. The bumper brackets have a little bit of play in them, and I'm actually going to be raising the bumper up about a 1/4 inch, so there will be an air gap between there and they won't be rattling or rubbing. But that was just a strategy just to make sure I can nail these two. And so what I had to do to get these guys equal, so I did first when I got this guy plumbed out to the back here, I put this piece of tape down, and that tape is perpendicular to the center line of the body, and that way I was able to put another piece of tape out here and use a square off of this piece of tape to get this so that it was parallel to the center line of the body and not angling out to the left or to the right. I wanted it to be level this way and come straight out the back. And so I used the tape to do that, and then when it came time to copy it to the other side, I used a plumb bob here, and I just did the plumb bob off the center of the exhaust tip down to the tape, and I marked that, drew a line back to my original tape. I used the plumb bob off of the center bolt on the bumper, dropped a line down, marked the center there, took that measurement, copied it out to here, drew a line that was at a 90 degrees out, measured the distance over there, copied it over here, and that way when it was time to get this tip up, I could use the plumb bob to make sure that this was the right distance out, and then I could just use my eyeball or the angle finder to make sure that the angle was the same, and then visually looking down, I could also make sure that it was parallel to the center line of the body. Now looking at them like this, it might seem like they're stuck out a little far for your taste, but what is missing from the equation here is the bumper guards that mount right here, and those are going to go out probably to about right here. And then in the center there's the pull down, and the pull down sticks out and it will be flush with the line of the tips, and so all that will kind of be right in line with each other. And I also have the bumperettes for the end here that widen everything about 3/16 of an inch probably, and so they're not going to look out of place. They're going to look nice and proper once all that's on. And so now I can check that off the list and we can move on to the next items. I have a whole bunch of parts all on the shelf over here that I just got from Summit Racing. So the things that I'm going to work on today are looking at mounting the clutch pedal and plumbing the clutch pedal. So I'll have a hard line going from the clutch master cylinder down to the firewall where it will meet up with the soft line from the hydraulic throwout bearing. So I'll do a 90-degree bulkhead fitting that goes through the firewall like I've done for the brake hard lines. And then this is the bleeder line, so I'm going to route that along the frame rail with the air line up to right here so that I can bleed the clutch when need be. Also, I'm going to get the steering column connected to the steering rack with a steering shaft, and to do that I need to take a section out of the chassis side engine mount because I'm not going to be able to go from A to B without running into this, and I kind of knew that, so I'm just going to scallop this out and weld in a thick-walled piece of tubing for the steering shaft to go through, and depending on how much I have to take out, I can always brace the bottom of it with a little triangle, with a little triangulation. So that should be fine. And this right here, this is really thick wall. This is thicker than it would normally need to be, but because I kind of figured that I was going to have to section this out, I went with the thicker material. So those are the two things that I'm going to start looking at today and start jamming on. And other things that are on the list are going to be getting a start on the fuel hard lines and fuel system. So I have the filters up here and a fuel log to split to both of the carbs. I have a pressure regulator, fuel pressure gauge. All that stuff is going to be a challenge to package neatly into the engine bay. And so that's something I'm going to start thinking about as well. And then tomorrow I have some nice hog ring pliers coming, so I can get all of the springs and everything back in the seat base. And then once I get that back together, I'll be able to put the burlap over it and the padding and the fabric back on and everything. And then I'll be able to put the seat in the car on the rails and sit in the car for the first time. I also need to start thinking about the seat backs and how I am going to make those work. I got to do a little bit of research to figure out how I can create some type of mechanism, some type of pivoting hinge, so that the seat backs will still lean forward to get access to the rear of the car. So that's just the things that I'm thinking about that are on the horizon right now. Of course, there's a whole lot more left to do with the car, but we're making good progress every day on it, and I'm getting really excited about seeing this thing on the ground with the doors and the body work on, and maybe even having this thing running within 3 or 4 weeks here. So I'm gonna get to work. I'll check back in with you guys in a little bit.
What's up there, Chomo? Listen here. How do you get a job here, there, fuckface?
Well, not by talking like that.